Tech Cocktail Conversations, candid insights from startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from around the globe.
I'm Phil Simon. I've written 5 books and I speak for a living. My most recent book is called Too Big to Ignore: The Business Case for Big Data. I usually reach out to people on social networks. I did that for my 3rd book, The New Small, and to some extent for my 5th book. With my 4th book, The Age of the Platform, how Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google have redefined business, I knew from the minute that I conceived of the book that it had to be those. So I really didn't want to reach out to others for that one. But it's a balance. I can do research as well as the next guy, but I also like connecting with experts and other people to maybe get something that isn't already available on the web. I've written 2 books that I don't want to say indict, but aren't exactly terribly flattering of large corporations. In fact, in my 3rd book, The New Small, the general premise is that it's better to be small because you can get a lot done without being encumbered by politics and bureaucracy and culture. So there are good big companies. It's not binary, but it would be very difficult for me to work for a very large organization and not want to pull my hair out, which is very difficult to do. Gosh, that's a great question. I'm a big believer that you can embrace platform thinking without being Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. I actually wrote that book because I had adopted a lot of this platform thinking. In other words, I entered adjacent lines of business. I did 10 years of IT consulting, and if I didn't write my first book, I would have needed to see a shrink. I enjoyed writing, so I wrote a few more books. Once you write, it's really not that far of a jump to start speaking, right? Once you speak and you've written books, then maybe you start to do a publishing company. So that's kind of one of my side projects. So I had entered these adjacent lines of business the same way that Amazon, for instance, doesn't just sell books or CDs or movies. It's creating its own content, right? It's getting into hardware, selling Kindles. It sells compute power through Amazon Web Services. So they jump into things as they make sense, and they're not afraid of taking risk. With regard to big data, there are absolutely small entrepreneurial startups, and I found out about many of them in the book. Because of open data, because of open source technology, it is very inexpensive for a startup to get going. Back in the dot-com boom, you really needed about $100 million to be a player. Now you're talking about fractions of that. I've heard of very few companies that get upfront $100 million. They may raise additional rounds like Facebook, like Twitter, as they become more valuable, but you almost have this proof of concept early on. So it's very difficult to me to minimize the impact of big data. Even if it's just an exit strategy, you may be the next Google, you probably won't. I mean, Google just dropped $1.1 billion on Waze. Something tells me the guys in Israel are pretty happy about that. So it may be a really sort of niche technology with regard to big data, but if it catches on or another company considers it valuable, many large companies like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, SaaS are purchasing startups because they augment their current offerings. So I think, as I say in the book, big data is too big to ignore, both as a user and if you were a startup. There are a lot of them. It's a hot area. But to me, you're silly if you think, oh, well, that's just something that big companies can do. Because of the cloud, because of software as a service, you don't need to buy millions of dollars of hardware. You basically can rent through some of the services that I mentioned before. The new one is called The Visual Organization, how intelligent companies use data visualization to make better decisions. And it'll be out in early 2014. We have big data, right? It's flying at us in all forms. And it's very difficult to make intelligent decisions if you're looking at a standard chart, right? Or rows on a spreadsheet. What if the data could be visualized, right? What if you could not just see some sort of static infographic? What if you could interact with it and learn from it? So that's the book in a nutshell, and I'm looking forward to researching it and learning more about it.